Okay, excellent. So welcome everybody. We're talking today about the true cost of runoff elections. Our first speaker is Kerwin Swint, Director of the School of Government and International Affairs at Kennesaw State University. He and his team just completed, or is maybe about to complete and publish some research done on the benefits of instant runoff, aka ranked choice voting in Georgia. And then our second speaker is Michael Corbin, who's a former candidate in the Republican primary for Georgia Congressional District, House District 7. And he's here to speak about his experience with that and how runoffs affected his district's election. So thank you guys so much for joining, and I will hand it over now to Kerwin. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be with you. Like Daniel said, I'm director of the School of Government and International Affairs at Kennesaw State, which includes political science, international studies, public administration, and so on. I'm also a professor of political science, and my research focus is electoral politics, campaigns, political communication. So I'm going to try and share my screen here to sort of kick this off. Let me see. Can you all see that? Let me see. Share.
I can see that.
Got it.
Got it? You got it? Okay. Yeah. So this is what's going on next Wednesday on the Kennesaw State campus. Me and a colleague in political science and one of our undergraduate students have been working on a research project this year on runoff elections in Georgia. It's a subject that we've been interested in for a while, and so our interest just coincided with Better Ballot Georgia. And the research project is supported in part by a grant from Eternal Vigilance Action, which is a 501c3 in Georgia. And so we've been testing some of these ideas we have about how runoff elections are conducted, the costs of them, the public choice mechanisms that kick in, those sorts of things. So it's an academic research project, but it has practical real-world applications, which is the kind of research that I like to do. I've been involved in what you might call public scholarship on a number of fronts for a number of years. And so we're excited about this. We are still working on it. Our presentation where we reveal our research results and have a sort of a discussion on IRV is next Wednesday. And we are almost finished with the project. We're still writing it. In fact, we'll probably still be writing it Wednesday morning if academics are true to nature. And so I was very glad to come on and give you sort of a preview of what we're doing this evening. So this is an executive summary. This is sort of a guiding principles or takeaways of the project itself. And we wanted to test some of these, or test all of these in our project and get some quantitative data to try and give some backing to some of these ideas that we have. So the first is that Georgia is the only state in the country that has a majority vote requirement followed by a runoff election for both partisan primaries and for general elections. So that makes Georgia unique in this way. And being unique, we have certain significant costs, financial, administrative, and potentially in terms of public confidence in elections. In Georgia elections, there is a significant drop-off in voter participation from a general election to a runoff. Therefore, federal and statewide offices are routinely determined by a small number of voters, thereby calling into question Georgia's majority vote requirement. The financial costs of each county conducting a separate runoff election are significant, and taxpayers are routinely expected to cover those costs. For example, the January 2021 U.S. Senate election runoff, we estimate at this time, now we're not finished with the project yet, but we estimate it to be around $75 million, possibly higher for that one runoff election. When you take 159 counties and multiply the costs of conducting a whole separate election, you get a number approaching 60, 80, possibly even $100 million, but we'll see when we're completely finished with the research. Also, the general election campaign extended into a runoff campaign continues additional weeks, even months of intentionally negative communication. dividing Georgia's into the new year. And finally, Georgia needs a reform of its current majority vote requirement. There are options. We can move to a system of plurality voting, which is what most of the country uses. Or we could go to a system like instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting. So there are options out there. So I want to go to now the table of contents for our project. Our project runs about 50 or 60 pages. This will give you an idea of the kinds of things we're focusing in on. So for example, our first research question deals with a drop in turnout from general election to runoff elections. So that's the drop off or roll off from one election to another. And we all know that it's significant. It's higher, more significant in some elections over others, but we wanted to give it a measurement. And so you can see here, we use data from statewide races, US congressional races, state legislative races, state judicial races from 2012 to 2020 to try and measure this roll-off number and provide some quantitative data there to demonstrate how comparatively few people end up making a decision that affects all of us, statewide elections, federal elections for US Senate. And so that calls into question, do we need a majority vote? So that drop off is something we measured. So our hypothesis for this, for the drop off, is turnout for runoff elections will be significantly lower than turnout for general elections by county. And so we're going to use our data to try and prove that hypothesis. All right, the second research question has to do with the costs and burdens of conducting runoff elections in Georgia. So you have the cost of elections, which varies. The big metro Atlanta counties, it's going to be over $1 million, sometimes approaching $2 million or even more to hold a runoff election, which they just had the general election, which costs about the same. So they have a whole nother election. So it's practically doubling the cost, in some cases doubling the cost of conducting elections. So, and it's more than just costs, it's more than financial costs. It's administrative and logistical burdens of, the precinct locations, hiring and training the poll workers, security, all the things that goes into a county-wide administration of an election. To answer this research question, we administered a survey to county elections administrators in all 159 Georgia counties. To date, of the 159 counties, 50 have responded to our survey, so just under a 30% response rate, which for an academic study ain't bad. We obtained responses from county administrators in each geographical region of the state, in major metro areas, and in rural, less populated places. We asked administrators several questions about the costs of administering specific general and runoff elections, for example, 2018 and 2020. We also asked the administrators open-ended questions about challenges they encounter performing their jobs. So it's a financial burden, but it's also an administrative and a logistical burden that all counties face. Right, so the third research question is the nastiness, the political negativity in runoff elections. So voters routinely cite campaign negativity and nastiness as a reason for being disengaged from the political process. Campaign negativity is endemic to American politics, but you can question an electoral process that furthers and extends the harshest aspects of campaign politics. To that end, we used the 2020 US Senate race runoff between Senator David Perdue and challenger John Ossoff as a case study to examine the effects of runoffs on campaign rhetoric. And we used various social science research methods to assess the rhetoric, the language, and the tone. So those are the research questions. Finally, this is another part of the table of contents. We get into the policy options. Without runoff elections, like I said, you can have just a plurality vote, like about 38 or 39 states in the country have. You can do instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting, which a number of states are now experimenting with in different forms. And we go through a few different examples here: Maine, New York City, Alaska, but there are different versions in other places as well. So that's the basics of our study. That's pretty much it. We hope to be able to prove with quantifiable data the drop-off, the costs, the burdens, and the intensely negative rhetoric with this study. We feel pretty good about the response rate to the survey. We feel very good about the data we've been able to accumulate. And it's going to be an ongoing research project. We're really just getting started. 50 states have responded to the survey. We want to get that up closer to 100 over the next couple of months, if possible. But we feel pretty good about what we've already been able to learn. With that, I'd be happy to take a few questions about the project or about the study.
Thank you so much, Kerwin. If you guys have questions, I'd ask you to put them in the chat. If you can also ask to be unmuted. I believe I've disabled people from unmuting themselves at this time. The first question is, did they do research on danger to poll workers today? Was that?
Some of that information will come in the open-ended questions that we asked county administrators about, the elections officials, because we asked them, what are your burdens? What are the tasks? What are the challenges in doing this? And so it's sort of a qualitative open-ended question. And so we have captured the responses. And so I can't remember if danger to poll workers is one of those, but that's where that would come into play.
Thank you. I also have some questions that I thought of that I'll field, but if anybody else thinks of some, please go ahead and post them. So this money that it costs to run elections is primarily spent by counties, right?
Yep.
Where could that money easily be rebudgeted to if it's not being spent on elections?
Well, you can imagine if they don't have to spend, say for Cobb County, let's say they don't have to spend $2.5 million on a runoff election. They could spend it on transportation, or they could spend it on housing, or they could spend it on, any number of things that the county needs, or Gwinnett County or Fulton County. And so it's going to be a different number for different counties, but it's a significant cost.
A couple more questions have come in the chat. Can you extrapolate to get a total cost of a statewide runoff in Georgia?
That's what we're trying to do with this data we're accumulating. And so our estimate right now is a number around 75 million. I think by the time we hear from, like I said, close to 100 counties, 100 of the 159 counties in Georgia, it's going to be a number probably closer to $100 million statewide. It's hard to get from some of these counties a hard and fast number. One challenge has been some of the rural counties that may not have as much data readily available, or as many records readily available. We talked to one rural county, for example, that told us they conducted the entire countywide election for about $4,500. And we just don't believe that. So we don't think that's a real number. But the closer we get to being able to hear from more and more counties, we feel very confident that it's at least $75 million statewide.
Wow. Do you have plans to present this study to legislators or elected officials, election officials?
One of our co-collaborators has invited, I believe, has invited several legislators to our Wednesday unveiling of the data. And we do plan to make our full report available to legislators. So yes, that report will be available in print form and electronic form. And anyone who wants to see a copy of it can see it. And we do plan to give it to legislators, absolutely.
Who is benefiting from the extra cost of a runoff? Workers, administrators, et cetera?
That's a great question. Who benefits from it? It was put in place in the 1960s by the Georgia legislature because of this drive for a majority winner, which a lot of southern states have had that were one-party Democratic states at the time. And so, conceivably, they would say, well, it benefits the voters, it benefits the public. But I think that has long past been true when it benefits the public. It benefits the people who sell advertising, airtime, and print advertisements, that sort of thing. It certainly benefits them.
I have one more question. Did you analyze the cost of implementing ranked choice voting? Would that, is that right? We're saving about $100 million, it sounds like, from not conducting the runoffs, but is there offsetting costs to implementing it?
There will be some, but it'll be minimal. We have done some research into this. The companies who do the voting machines, for example, the voting systems that states like Georgia employ, they do have an alternative vote method available, and so there is some kind of software process that can be utilized, and so there would be some cost for a transition to that. It would be fairly minimal, and there should only be a one-time cost. So it won't be free, but it'll be very, we'll say, nominal compared to what we're doing now.
Would Georgia need to change its voting machines to completely new ones?
Not necessarily. They certainly could change, but they don't have to. As far as I know, Dominion Voting Systems has that option for alternative voting software program. So in fact, it may be free. I haven't really checked into that, but it'll be reasonable if there is a cost.
A few more have come in. We may not have time for all of them because I definitely want to make sure we have time for our second speaker as well. But a few more. I noticed that you advocate for a change, and the two options are plurality and RCV. Do you have a preference, or are you simply stating that a change is needed and these are the options?
Well, it's really both. I mean, a change is needed and these are the options. I mean, if I was king and I could choose, I would say just get rid of runoffs, just have plurality voting. That would be the simplest, most straightforward way to do it. And again, that's what most of the country does. But if there is a desire to have a majority vote, then certainly IRV is a preferred means of getting there.
Well, I certainly want a majority vote, but that's, that's better about Georgia's opinion. Does the fact that Georgia has so many counties pose a research challenge, and does it make it more expensive on an administrative level relative to other states?
It's certainly a challenge getting information from 159 counties, who are run independently and have different, staffs and ways of doing things. The question about it becoming more expensive, not necessarily, but it certainly can, if you think about duplication of services and, those sorts of things. I mean, Georgia has so many counties, that it's a real administrative hurdle in a lot of cases. A big place.
Yeah. So I think this is the last question, and then we'll switch over. Do you have any research on, or have you done any research on public opinion regarding instant runoff voting?
I haven't conducted any, or we haven't conducted any, but I have read research related to ranked choice voting. There's an increasing amount of it out there, as there are an increasing number of ranked choice voting options in different states. I mentioned Maine, New York City, California, Alaska. Now Alaska has gone to a very confusing system of jumbo primaries, top 4 ranked choice voting, and it's produced some very interesting results. But there's an increasing amount of literature out there, and Maine probably is a very good example of how to do this kind of voting, and it would be probably one of the models Georgia would look to if we were to go to this kind of system.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kerwin, so much for sharing your research, sharing your knowledge. This is extremely valuable as we try to strive forward to making our system run a little bit better for everyone, and we appreciate it.
You bet. Glad to do it. Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
So we'll switch gears now over to our second guest, Michael Corbin, who I may need to ask to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear
All right, good.
buzzing too, maybe some background fan noise.
Is there?
It might be your computer fan, but I think when you talk, it
Is
overpowers.
everybody? I can switch to my headset if that might help.
What does everybody else think?
Everybody else hearing it?
Yeah, well, you can hear it, but when you talk, it's not very loud. So I didn't find it bothering.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll roll. It will roll. That if it gets worse, I'll throw on my headset. I wear it most of the day anyway, so.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Daniel. I think this is kind of a perfect follow-up really to what Kerwin was talking about. I'm going to try to do my best to give you guys a real life example of where our current system in the state of Georgia is really failing voters. It's really a kind of a case study in terms of why we need something, right? Whether it's plurality voting or ranked choice voting or instant runoff, whatever you want to call it, there's got to be a better way. There's so many disenfranchised voters out there, and I learned the hard way running for Congressional District 7 here in 2022 in the primary, and I'm about to go through kind of that experience, what I've seen, and then what probably could have happened if we had something like ranked choice voting in place. I am a fan of majority voting, but it's got to be done the right way. If it's not done the right way, then it leads to all the things that we just talked about. A lot of money being expended by the counties, and at the same time, lack of voter awareness. So I'll go through that, but kind of a little background, how I got involved. It was really, I don't know if it was fate, call it whatever you want, but about 2 weeks after I lost my runoff, I ran into a couple volunteers out at the Peachtree Corner celebrating the 20th anniversary of becoming a city, and I ran into them. I started talking to them, and they started talking about ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting. And at the time, I was telling them my story, and I really got passionate about it. I was like, yeah, this makes sense. I think this is something that our state could use. So, I actually have come on board, and, we'll be, doing some speaking to different groups to try to, push this along, to make this a reality, because I think it's really needed in this state and to help the country as well. So, I'm preparing. I've been working with Bill Bozarth, and, going to be starting to go around and doing some of those presentations to try to get people on board, especially conservatives within the Republican Party. Sometimes it can be a little bit, everything is a conspiracy. I want to take the scary out of it for them. It's not. It's just about getting the right candidate and route, making sure that it's representative of the actual constituency. So, I ran into them. And I'm going to keep this conversation partisan and just kind of go over the facts. But, I really believe in the organization, and that's why I'm here talking today. And I'm, really glad that Daniel invited me to speak. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Hopefully this works. Actually, Daniel, can I share my screen?
1 second. Let me see. I can.
Kind of want to show some visuals so people can see the stark resemblance or differences between what happened and why it's so impactful in a lot of districts.
You should be able to share now.
Okay. All right. Does everybody see that?
I can see it.
Good. All right, so everybody already kind of knows who I am. So ran for the Republican Party in the 2022 Georgia Congressional District 7, and I'll get into what that district looks like, and it changed dramatically after the redistricting this past year. And really just why I believe, again, in instant runoff voting and how things probably could have ended up different in my race, not only in the primary, but potentially in November as well, to really represent the people of the district, not the parties. And that's really what we need to start looking at as a country. So without further ado, I'll kind of jump into it here. Quick talking points. I'm going to talk about who I am, why I ran. A lot of people call me crazy for running. issues I see with the current election process, a lot of what Kerwin just said, a lot of what probably you guys already know, a lot of what I experienced that I didn't know. Give you a little bit of background on my congressional district. Some of you may live in the congressional district that I actually ran in. Some of the candidates in the election and kind of the differences and where they fall on the spectrum politically, and then kind of how that maybe would have played out when it comes to instant runoff voting. I'm going to go through the election analysis real quick, really the first round primary, the second round runoff, and then really my observations of what I saw in both of those. And then summary and conclusion, what I learned, what I could see as potential outcomes. And again, I'm a little partisan because I did run in the race, and you'll see kind of the stats from the first round to the runoff. And then just kind of how I feel this is a testimony for, Better Ballot Georgia's purpose, and why I'm passionate about this cause. So introduction overview, just real quick, I'm not going to bore you. 41 years old. I reside in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. Lived in Gwinnett County for pretty much my entire life. Got a wife and 2 daughters. Graduated from Duluth High School, 1999. University of Georgia, 2003. Like Kerwin, I was in political science and international affairs at the School of Public and International Affairs at Georgia. Did not go into that field after college. Was going to go into law, but things in my life just didn't play out that way. So I went into the next thing that obviously you would go into if you were not going into politics or law, which is sales. So I'm currently an executive director of sales. Been in a leadership position for a little over a decade, and I've spent about 18 years in the communications industry. So why I ran, good question. You should get the guy pulling his hair out. Well, that was me, December 2020. I was sitting around after that election, which was just a complete mess, and everybody going crazy, the entire country, COVID going on, and I just thought to myself, you're just sitting around complaining. You've got your wits about you, but why don't you just run? What do you have to lose, right? So start thinking about it, and the first thing that came to my head is, run for Congress, right? So sat down that morning and filed with the FEC, and was getting into something I had no clue of what I was getting into, but I felt a personal conviction that go and do it, do something, try to make a change. The system I felt was not working. It wasn't representing the people on either side. I don't think, in my opinion, whether you were on the Trump or Biden side, I don't feel like it was anything that really represented the majority of the people in our country. And that's why I was pulling my hair out, because we were all fighting over things that most of us really were more centered on than polarized by. So that's really why I ran. I really could try to say it was more detailed, but it was just a passion that I wanted to jump into it and see what I could do. A common guy that just is going to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to run. And I knew that I would be, facing headwinds the entire time, but I decided to do it. But we'll also get into why people like me don't want to run, because of a lot of the factors that we'll bring up here in just a second, and probably what you already know. We're really just dissuaded from trying to run because it is so difficult to actually win. So issues with the current election process, I think a lot of us already know this. I saw this firsthand. The establishment, the media, they're for both sides, the establishment for Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter, and the media, they polarize the country. They create the narrative, division, and ultimately limit your choices at the polls. And it trickles its way down to the local level. So you find candidates that pander to the establishment, the media, and what's being driven by both of them. And you find that at the local level. And I found that out in a really hard way. Did not get much support, even though I was supported more by the people than I was by the party. There's a lot of negativity and hyper-partisanship, that comes just between the two parties, but there's rampant division within each party, rampant, in both sides. And it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. If you're not for us, you're against us, party versus party, and even in the parties. Limited voter choice, right? Especially during runoffs, you're going to get two people that, for the most part, one's probably going to be more representative of the actual general public. The other one's going to be more representative of the establishment and what the media is kind of driving. So leads the voters to feeling unrepresented, and that's without saying. It again goes back to reluctance of qualified candidates to run. The more people that hear, I'm telling my story, but the more people that hear my story don't want to run. Right? It's not easy. You spend a lot of time, trying to raise money. Most people still have jobs and trying to run families, so. People think to themselves, why the heck would I do that, right? So you really push a lot of good Americans that really want to do something positive for their country out of doing something positive for their country. So it really goes against, really the American spirit of becoming one for the people and representing the people. So all in all, the election process is just not great. And like Kerwin said, they want to maintain the status quo, and it's dictated by a small percentage, and I can tell you that for sure. It's 100% fact. They want division. They want fight. So a little bit about my district. It underwent a pretty big change from 2020 to 2022, both in size, just area, and also in demographics. So it includes the cities of Peachtree Corners, Duluth, Norcross, Johns Creek, Snellville, Lilburn, Loganville, Grayson, Decula, and Loganville. So kind of the lower half of Gwinnett County there. As you can see in 2020, this is a 2020 representation, how much farther this extended up into Forsyth, a little bit over to what is now the expanded 6th district, and then cut off down here, but also up into what is now the 9th. So we were kind of given a very compact slice of the pie, which was by design by the General Assembly to kind of gerrymander that into making the 6th and the 9th more of a easier path for the Republican Party. But nevertheless, 7th is my district, and I stayed in it and wanted to run in the 7th district. So it's where I've lived a lot of my life, and that's where I have a passion for the people, and I've seen a lot of the changes. We have registered voters of roughly about 485,000. And during the change from 2020 to 2022, this went from really a toss-up district, and it was won by the Republicans. In the prior, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6 elections before that, by about 3 percentage points, and then Carolyn Bordeaux won it by about 3 percentage points in 2020. So it's always been a kind of variable, just toss-up, but it's a D+16 on paper now. So the Democrats have a strong, heavy hand in this district, which is one of the probably major reasons why Lucy McBath jumped over. So she'll be representing, obviously, in November, the Democratic Party. But it's currently one of the most diverse, at least I think, districts in the state when it comes to race, age, gender, religion, socioeconomics, sexual orientation, everything. It's just one of the most diverse, and it has a pretty large population. So things drastically changed year over year, if I have to make any point there. So let's get into the candidates real quick. We have 5. 4 of them were first-time candidates, including me. We only had 1 repeat candidate from 2020, and he ended up becoming my opponent in the runoff. He only got 5,000 votes in the 2020 Republican primary. At that time, Rich McCormick was actually in the 7th district, and he was the one who faced Carolyn McBath. I'm getting the two mixed up. Carolyn Bordeaux. We really, and again, take this with a grain of salt because this is kind of my opinion, but I also spent a lot of time with these people during the campaigning process. In my belief, based on just how they position themselves and their stances, and their posture, there were 2 clearly far-right candidates, and that was Mary and Mark. We had 2 moderate conservative candidates, and that would have been me and Lisa McCoy. And then YG, he was kind of a middle to moderate candidate. And I've got some pictures of other people on the political spectrum of where they really fall, so you can kind of get an idea. Mitt Romney, I got Biden up here, Kamala. So, you know, you can kind of find out where everybody falls on the spectrum when it comes to my race. So it was somewhat all over I won't say all over the board, but it was a good representation of moderate to middle to all the way far right. So it takes me to the first round of the primary. So May 24, 2022. At the end of the day, everything was tallied up. I had 41% of the vote. Mark had 27. This was his second time running, 27.3. And he had about 12,000 votes, a little over 12,000 votes. And then the rest, you know, had a handful of votes that came in. Lisa McCoy with the most there at, you know, a little over 60. If she had 60, she would have won 6,000. So as Kerwin mentioned, I don't know if Kerwin's still on or not, because I feel like now I have bad information up here. So in any other state besides Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi, when it comes to primaries, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was talking about primaries and general, this race would have been over. 41%, it would have been plurality rule. Mark would have been gone. I would have won. That's it. This isn't a sob story for me. This is just as I get into more of the meat of it, is to why I don't feel it's a good representation of my district. So the Republican voter turnout was not good. If you want to look at this, 45,000, let's call it 45,000. It's only 9.3% of all registered voters in the district. So pretty low. Midterms are always going to be a little bit lower, obviously, than a presidential year. But it was pretty low for the Republicans. But it was just about as equally as low for the Democrats, right? So they about 48,000, rounded up to 49,000, 10% of the 458,000 voters that are registered within the district. So total turnout, 19.3% of all registered voters. The national average for 2022 was 31%. So we were well below the national average. So the second round, which is where we kind of get into the head scratching, not so much for me, but it kind of goes to show you why runoffs don't work. So voter turnout, well, let's go ahead and go to the results here. I mean, Mark won with 70%. And we'll get back down to political ideologies and there's some other particulars of why this would happen. But he got 70% of the vote, a little over 8,000. I got roughly around 3,500. And the total votes were 11,667, which is, that's just pathetic, right? I mean, it's just bad. But we'll get into this, and I don't blame the voters, and I truly don't. I blame the system. But the voter turnout dropped by a whopping 33,359 voters. Only 26% of them from round one actually came back out to the polls. So that's 2.5% of all registered voters, regardless of party affiliation. So you don't have to register for a party, so you can come pull a ballot for whoever you want, whenever you want. So why, right? I mean, why such a huge drop-off? Why are only 11,000, call it 20,000 people deciding who's going to represent a district in D.C. in November? So when you start to really look at that, it's a little scary. It's 2.5% of all registered voters are picking a candidate when it comes down to the end of the day. So my observations as we got into the runoff is Well, first is this sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I'm tired. I'm tapped out. I've been trying to, raise money. I've been trying to campaign, door knock. I've been working at the same time. Kids, I'm putting out signs, and now I've got to do this again for another month. So I was pretty tapped out, but I kept charging ahead. But the more I went around, even people that I knew that voted for me did not know that there was a runoff, thought I won. 41%. They don't even know the laws about Georgia that you have to have a majority. People that I met canvassing, going around all throughout the district, they didn't know. What? It's coming up? Yeah. They didn't know. Many voters still don't know. They probably never will. They didn't know. So there's such a lack of awareness about even having a runoff. That's why I can't blame any voter for not coming back out, especially if you don't know it and you see the results and you see somebody at 41%, you're not really reading that there's a runoff. You're probably not going to come back out unless there's a runoff for something major like maybe a governor race. So in my mind, and again, this is my opinion, but what this runoff created, was just lack of voter education and awareness. Is what it came down to. Just nobody knew what was going on. Voter confusion. Why is there a runoff anyway? If a candidate had that large of a lead, why are we having a runoff? People would ask me that question. Lack of resources for candidates. I mean, the burden is completely on the shoulders of the candidates to spend more money, to create commercials, content, to get out back on the streets. So everything is on the candidate's shoulders. So you have frustrated voters. A lot of them, now being asked to go back out for a second time, feel it's an inconvenience. And the results end up not representing the constituents at large, in my opinion. And if you look at the previous slide that I just showed, only 11,000 came back out. And it was more than a complete reversal of the first round. And really what is sad is that thousands of votes from the first round, even unknowingly to a lot of the voters because they weren't educated that there was a runoff, literally are thrown in the trash. Literally thrown in the trash. To me, it's a sad state of affairs that we as American citizens can go out and vote and not have the awareness, our voters, and think that their vote counted, and it really didn't. So summary and conclusion, in the first round, I'll be honest, it was pretty civil in nature, but like probably in any party, I obviously didn't do this with the Democrat Party, but a lot of candidates tailored their message strategically to fit a far-right narrative and within a certain group. They knew, because of the majority rule, that this was the way to win the primary. They're gaming the system. So our current process promotes this behavior, so the party candidate gets the nod for November, not really the person that may be the best fit for the people and what the people want, because they're not going to be able to, and I'll be honest with you, within the GOP, I was not admired very much because they knew I was not going to be the person that they could probably manipulate. So they want to get their person in there, and I can probably say this is true for both parties, and that's the problem with the two-party system. So they want to get their person to get the nod. The runoff was far from civil. My opponent, he just doubled down on the far-right narrative, calling me a liberal. I had to fight back and defend myself. I tried to be above board as much as I could. But, it came down to the local GOP members, specifically, within Gwinnett County. If you weren't part of that membership, which is usually consisting of a lot of far right, they didn't want you to know about the runoff, and they wanted their candidate to win. So it was intentionally, to disregard awareness outside of those members, because in the end, they got the guy, and that's the guy that they wanted in the race, but not really, in my opinion, what the people would have chosen. So I just ran through, and after talking with Bill and Daniel, kind of some of these, just how the ranked choice voting works, and based on where the people fell on the political spectrum, using just probabilities, I would have come up with that this probably would have only come to a round two. Lisa McCoy, if we're taking a look at the top bracket there, which is me, was probably the most moderate. So, and these are just making educated guesses. Again, I got to make the disclaimer down here. I know this is being recorded. This is a predictive model driven by personal opinion based on each candidate's spot on the political spectrum. But McCoy, she was probably, in my opinion, again, the most moderate. So I would say that probably a higher percentage of her voters would have ranked me as a second choice. So I just put 30%. Mary was the furthest right, just wanted obligatory 10%. And YG Nystorm was kind of down the middle, so I just put 25%. And I just flipped McCoy and West. And by doing that, based on the votes, if it went to a second round, you can see the results. It would have been a majority, 55 to 39, and it would have been done. And again, hypothetical. But when you look at the political spectrum and people making logical choices, highly possible. So, what I really feel is that this race, at least my race, is a testimony for, better about Georgia's vision. It's just, we need it, right? It checked all the boxes. There was negativity and hyper-partisanship, but more so it was within the party. Everybody had a lack of confidence in the system. There's a loss of confidence in the system. Very limited voter choice, but even less, they just didn't really even have the awareness that people were going out. At the end of the day, whether they know it or not, and I think that's a lack of education, is that they're going to go vote for somebody based on party and not really based on ideology and who they feel the best person is to move the country forward. So if they're a Republican, they're just going to go vote for my opponent. And again, it leads to reluctance of qualified candidates to run. It's kind of a little more, I guess I would say, thrown fuel on my fire already to maybe run again, just because of what I saw and how controlled and manipulated the process was. And again, it was manipulated by a small percentage of people that end up deciding who's going to be a representative in Washington. And that goes for both parties. And again, we talked about this already at length. It's expensive. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of money Gwinnett County and the sliver of Johns Creek spent for 11,000 voters just to come out and vote. So what are we left with in November in my district, which I love? Well, I'll go ahead and put it down there. It's just with a doctor ordered, a far left candidate versus a far right candidate. It's what we got. It's what we always want. That's what they want. Everybody fighting. We'll all see the fun ads. Constituents are the ones that are paying the price. So, in my opinion, again, ranked choice voting instant runoff, I think, is the best choice. Plurality would be the next best. But the system that we have going right now with the runoff leads to this almost every single time. So I appreciate you guys listening. I'll shut up now, and I know we're running about 5 minutes up until the top of the hour. So Daniel, if we have time for questions, I'll take any. If not, then people will share my contact information. They can feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Corbin, so much for that. That was really, really amazing. Just to see the deep dive on all that happened there, to see this deep drop off in voters. Thank you so much for your time. I think we've got time for some questions. So if you do, in fact, let me just, I'll allow people to unmute themselves now. If you just want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Or you can type something into the chat and we can send that along to Michael. Mike, do you go by Mike or Michael?
Either or, yeah. Mike. My mom calls me Michael.
Okay.
I had a comment.
Yeah.
I think one of the points you can add to your slide, I'll see if I can find something to back this up, but what I've read is that when you use instant runoffs, the plurality winner, which you were before the runoff came around, something like 90% of the time he wins in an instant runoff, and it changes the tone, which is something that you pointed out. But it just seems like you probably would, statistically, you probably would have won since you were in the lead to begin with. That's all. I'll see if I can find something out about that.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate that. And yeah, I think the one thing I tried to do is I tried to see the big picture, and I know the district, so I didn't tailor my approach to, the far right. And that's not me, number one. Number two, I wasn't looking just to win the primary. I wanted to try to be there in November and actually win. So it does limit you, and it forces candidates, and I think some that don't have the willpower to stand up for who they are and where they really fit on the political spectrum, to start to become something that they're not, which is an issue.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike. So I posted a comment, but figured just to bring it up again.
Sure.
Eye-opening, your whole story. And I mean, for all of us, like, we're out on the front lines and we realize all of the benefits and everything, but just eye-opening. But also, I think it's crazy that your whole presentation is just talking about getting the nomination for the Republicans. And so to take it one step forward, if you would have won, let's say we go into November and the Democrats are not, for whatever reason, they are not going to get their candidate. It's not going to happen. Just say that is true. Who would they have rather wanted out of the Republican candidates? And I mean, just educated guess, like you've been saying, I think as a more moderate candidate, you would have fit the bill. So, I mean, that's like even on top of just all of the, trying to think of a PC word to say, but all of the stuff that happened just in the primary side. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, it is, and if you look at it, those that supported Bordeaux, and with just the political climate and things going on with the economy, there may have been some independent or people that maybe even flipped from Republicans that were somewhat moderate Republicans that may have gone back, but when they see the far right, they're just going to say that that you are what you are and you don't fit what we're looking for, and they may not even be happy with the far left, but they're going to go back to what they know. So it really is, in my opinion, a kind of a disservice to how we solve this just ultra bipartisanship that we have within DC at this time. So that's why I'm very passionate about this, because I think the more we get on to this, the more the people have the power, and the establishment, the party, has less and less of it.
100%. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, so much for your time and for your presentation. This was really wonderful. I'm going to wrap things up here with a little bit of update about just Better Ballot Georgia. I think we've got some people here who are a little bit new, maybe haven't met us before. You've heard some of the people here talk about us. So let me just do a quick presentation and then we'll let you guys go. But so who is BBGA? We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to grassroots activism and building a groundswell of voter outcry over our flawed election system. And we advocate for the solution, instant runoff voting. Instant runoff voting is a somewhat of another name for ranked choice voting. It uses the same ranked choice ballot system, but it's not like the same as what is done in Alaska, for example. This is really a solution that's best tailored for Georgia to solve this runoff problem and the hyperpartisanship that it causes, the money that it wastes, and just to fix all of that. So we're focused on communicating how IRV solves these problems in Georgia, communicating them to voters, politicians, journalists, community leaders, pastors, business leaders, etc. And so really, like, the dream of what we're trying to build here is a movement of, eventually maybe 100 people in each of these 60 targeted districts that we have to be loud advocates for instant runoff voting, and hopefully to have multiple cities passing resolutions calling for instant runoff voting. We take a metrics-based approach to building our movement that many of you have seen before. I'm actually going to skip over that part right now. Here's an example of our targeting, just to show you an example of how wide across Georgia it is. These are key districts that we've found that should be influential in the legislature, and that's really where we're trying to build strong support. But support everywhere matters. We need all of Georgia to be on board with this. And we've been really building an amazing coalition to date, and that's enabled us to attract interest from certain other good government organizations that have granted us money to actually hire a full-time paid field organizer, statewide organizer, and that person is Ben Raleigh, who is on the call with us today, I believe. So I just want to give him a moment to introduce himself. I can't find him. Did he have to drop? He should. Ben, if you're here, unmute yourself. It looks like he may have had to drop. Okay, well,
He dropped.
come to our event in October. You'll get to meet him for sure there. Let me post the link in the chat for that. Oh, I only have the calendar link. So you can find our October statewide meeting on our calendar. You'll also find other events where you can volunteer on our calendar. Events like that, those petition drives, those are where we met Mike first a few weeks ago. And that's really just about going out, talking to voters, talking to citizens about this important reform. So I'm improvising here. So let me actually also link to you a volunteer interest form. If you would like to volunteer with us, we would be more than happy to have you. We're always looking for more volunteers. And so if you're interested at all, please go to our volunteer interest form here and let us know. We're looking for people who are, can make phone calls, who can go out and speak in public, who can go out, and gather petition signatures, or people who can build relationships with other organizations. All these things are going to be really important. The last really important thing I want to make sure everyone knows about is that in January, there's going to be a bill in front of the legislature for sure that will it will be a municipal enabling bill that would allow cities to opt in to using ranked choice voting. This would be the same kind of bill that is that was introduced last year and made it out of the committee with unanimous and bipartisan support, hoping to make it a little bit farther this year. And one of the key aspects of that is going to be getting people to call their representatives when that bill is up and let them know that they support that bill. So that's going to be a key focus of ours coming into the next couple of months, is just building a broad support across Georgia. And yeah, is there anything else? I'm probably forgetting something. I'm trying to cram it all in at the end. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer. But thank you all for joining, and it was great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for running this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for the invite. Pleasure meeting everybody.
Thanks, and if you could perhaps make the video available for those of us who were crossing over a couple of different meetings and conflicts. I came in a little bit into the first speaker, would like to catch up a bit.
Yeah, sure. We'll be posting this video to our YouTube page. It's Better Ballot Georgia on YouTube. You should be able to find it there in a few days. And I'll try to send out an email to every attendee so that they have a link to that as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Mike, I see you've got your hand raised. Mike Koenig, I should clarify. And it looks like, well, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and end the meeting here. Thank you guys for joining, and have a wonderful night.
Thanks, Daniel. Bye, everybody.